On river, flow with the flood tide and ebb with the ebb tide. Round on crested and scallop-edged waves, gorgeous clouds of the south shore, countless crowds of passengers. Stand up, tall masts of Manhattan. Stand up, beautiful hills, Brooklyn. Throb, baffled and curious brains. Throw out questions and answers. Suspend here and everywhere. Eternal flows of solution. Gaze loving and thirsting eyes. In the house, or street, or public assembly. Sound out voices of young men, loudly and musically call me by my nice name. Live, old life. Play the part that looks back on the actor or actress. Play the old role, the role that is great or small, according as one makes it.
Where's my mirror? We're ready. Ready? Amir is going to read a little history about Sandy
The executive director of the Historical Society Museum on Staten Island. I'd like to tell you about a part of my family history, Sandy Ground and Brooklyn. After slavery was abolished in New York in 1827 and the Sandy Ground community developed on the South Shore of Staten Island, Maryland oystermen would come to Sandy Ground to work in the off-season, receiving oyster beds. They worked for the New York oystermen on Staten Island and rented rooms from the African American farmers at Sandy Ground. They returned to Maryland once the jobs were done. This continued for a few years. Maryland became a part of the Confederacy and passed laws that restricted the free African Americans from making a living. Some of the oystermen moved to Sandy Ground and became a part of the oyster industry on Staten Island. Eben Bishop was one of those oystermen who migrated to Sandy Ground. I am a sixth-generation descendant of Eben Bishop. Sandy Ground was home to one of Zion African Methodist Episcopal churches. Is proud of its over 100 Staten Island. He interacted with oyster harvesters. As an author in Asians, it was no secret that Whitman had a huge appetite for oysters. Whitman frequented Manhattan oyster centers. The most fashionable oyster house was operated by Thomas Downing, a free black man who also came to New York from the Chesapeake Bay area, Maryland. New York's elite white society considered Downing to be the city's most renowned restaurateur. Thomas Downing operated a station of the Underground Railroad from behind his oyster cellar. In the early 1860s, just across the river from Manhattan, the Brooklyn Navy Yard was busy with iron workers working to complete the ironclads, President Lincoln's fighting ship for the Union Navy. Whitman's images of blast furnaces glowing red along the shoreline in the night served as a symbol of the controversial abolitionist movement. Some say the New York Police Department created the Marine Harbor Division to deter Confederate spies from sabotaging Brooklyn's warships builders. Whitman's gaze upon the waterfront dredged its own thoughts of evil. This was the face of the nation. as much a part of the landscape as the brilliant sunset beyond the tranquil hills of Staten Island, where my family and I still live today. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Good job.
So, welcome everybody. Um, no, it's fine. So, um, what we've done here is brought a lot of people together for the celebration of Walt Whitman, and we have had some contributors who have offered their words to give a little background. And there, so our contributor is Anne Waldman, an acclaimed American poet who has published 40 books. And in addition to being a writer, she is a performer, professor, editor, and activist. Anne Waldman is most famously known for her connection to Allen Ginsberg and the 1960s beat poets from Manhattan. Allen Ginsberg called Waldman, his, excuse me, I'm sorry. Ginsberg called Waldman his spiritual wife. In 1956, Ginsberg wrote his famous poem Howl on the 100th birthday of crossing Brooklyn Ferry. Anne Waldman is tied to many literary movements here in New York. However, in 1974, Waldman and Ginsberg co-founded the famous Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. This was the first Buddhist-inspired university in the Western Hemisphere. Presently, Anne Waldman runs the summer writing program at Naropa. Now, she is currently at a conference in Brussels, but she was kind enough to record her personal thoughts for us on Whitman's 200th birthday.
Hello, my name is Amir Dillade.
I don't think that was the wrong.
Hello, my name is Anne Waldman. I'm the poet currently organizing the program we do at Naropa every summer, the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics, founded by myself and Allen Ginsberg and Diane DePrima in 1974. This summer's program is against atrocity, and this relates to Whitman for me because he invoked a kind of world that was an antithesis reality to what we're experiencing now. Not that he was not living through some of the most difficult times ever in our republic. And I'm particularly interested in the Civil War years, the years of the good gray poet. I'm interested in how his life and work is relevant to so many younger poets sort of delving into who he was and his history, some of his prejudice as well. And these are times in his lineage, which I link to, of course, Allen Ginsberg, and a sense of bringing poetry into public space. And this is so important right now. And I like to use this phrase, antithesis reality, because it's the poets that will be the ones to carry on a kind of spiritual work, if you will, in how to work with our language, work with our thinking about the future, possibly the end of nature, possibly our own extinction. And this is very painful, very intense. We're at a crucial time in our extraordinary, trembling, fragile, shimmering capitalist scene. So he's an example of bringing voice to public space and connecting to so many people across the land, and so many of the views, the ethos that he espouses is becoming more open in terms of sexuality, gender, all those things. And in terms of being the sense of the poet being somebody who can speak for the
Let's continue with the next segment.
a few lines from There Was a Child Went Forth. There was a child went forth every day, and the first object he looked upon, that object he became, and that object became part of him for the day, or a certain part of the day, or for many years, or stretching cycles of years. So big vision, mega mind, containing multitudes, all the things we know about him. When I travel to other countries abroad, people in rickshaw drivers or cab drivers or people all over the world know who their poets are. And this is a poet. I think I did a year of querying cab drivers in New York City, and I'd say half of them had heard of Walt Whitman. So we're celebrating his 200th, and with great homage, and may it help educate our world. You look to the poets for the history, and poetry is news that stays news. Okay, thank you.
So that was Anne Waldman. Our next contributor is Professor Anthony Magistrelli, chair of the English department at the University of Vermont. Since 1983, Tony has authored many books on Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe. Tony is a poet as well, publishing several volumes to date. More recently, Tony co-authored a book with a former University of Vermont student entitled The Shawshank Experience, Tracking the History of the World's Favorite Movie. Perhaps the adults in the audience know the 1994 prison escape film that starred Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins. What you probably don't know is that the movie is based on a Stephen King 1982 novella. So let's now listen to Tony as he celebrates Walt Whitman and crossing Brooklyn Ferry.
My name's Tony Magistrelli, and I'm a professor at the University of Vermont in the English department, where I teach a lot of different courses, but most of them in American literature. And one of the courses I teach is a course on American poetry, specifically 19th century, because I do a lot of work in the 19th century. And so I often teach classes on Walt Whitman, and which is why it's a good match to have me talking about one of my favorite poets and one of America's favorite poets, especially on this celebration. And it's good to be talking about Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, B5, that had only about a dozen poems or so. And gradually, as Whitman progressed as a poet and as I guess I would call it, his reputation grew, he collected these poems into Leaves of Grass. And Crossing Brooklyn Ferry eventually made its way into Leaves of Grass, as it rightly should, and it embodies a lot of the same issues that one finds in his earliest work, like Song of Myself, but also even in his latest work, the work that he did after Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. So lots of poems come between the first edition of Leaves of Grass and the last edition of Leaves of Grass, including Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, which probably is a good segue into me talking about where we locate Crossing Brooklyn Ferry in Walt Whitman's prodigious canon. In many ways, I think this 1856 poem embodies the archetypal themes and lyrical structure that one finds throughout the multiple editions of Leaves of Grass. We have, for example, the presence of the ferry itself as a connecting metaphor between the two land bodies, Brooklyn and Manhattan. This was a poet who was always looking for metaphors that promoted connectivity. And that is to say, metaphors and tropes that brought people and animals and the various elements of the universe together. This was not somebody who looked at the world in terms of its atomization, that is, as individual elements that were separated and could never be joined together. Quite the opposite. Whitman took the most obscure and the most disparate elements that he encountered through his life and through his travels and always looked at them in terms of connectivity. How did they bring a unification? How did they connect to each other? And that's why he chose the title Leaves of Grass, because just like grass is a ubiquitous element in the world. I mean, you can find it on playgrounds, you can find it in prisons, but you can also find it on the manicured estates of wealthy people. For Whitman, that democratic sense of how we all share a common fate and share a common humanity and a common universe is what made grass such an important concept and construct in the Whitman universe. Well, at any rate, this isn't really a poem about grass, after all. It's quoting here from Whitman that shall cross from shore to shore, end of quote, on daily journeys to work and home, but also as a means for unifying and connecting the past, the present, and the future, which were also core elements in Whit poetics. As he says in Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, 50 years hence, I will see them as they cross. 100 years hence, or ever so many 100 years hence, others will see them. And I interpret those lines to mean essentially that Whitman's saying, even though he's writing this poem in the present, he knows that it's going to have a resonance that's going to extend beyond the present. It's like dropping a stone in a still lake or a still body of water and watch the ripples come out from where that stone makes contact. Whitman knew that it had this way of linking, if you will, 50 years hence, 100 years hence. There's a circularity at work. And there's also a circularity at work in terms of how the ferry operates, right? That also is another symbol of connectivity, going from Brooklyn to Manhattan and back again. And interestingly enough, that the ferry brings people home, but also takes them to work. Work was a very important part of the Whitman universe. He understood the dignity of work, and he understood the importance of work as a way of it's something we all do, of course, but it's also something that he saw as being dignified. Nobody's job was inferior to anybody else's job. That's part of that democratic vista that Whitman had when he looked at America. And work was important to the building of America. Work was important to the building of an individual's consciousness and personality. And it's really fun to see how Whitman works with work. And other poets that followed Whitman, like Philip Levine and Allen Ginsberg, who were also aware of the value of work and the importance of it. I like the ferry. I mean, it's very easy to focus your attention in this poem on the water, because after all, it is that famous harbor in New York City, and it serves this poise to signify circularity and human connection. It laps the land masses that it touches, both Brooklyn as well as Manhattan. It represents another image of people flowing across the ferry and living on either sides of the water. And it represents the flow of time, too. It represents the flow of history. They're doing it now. They did it back in the 19th century. It's going to continue on into the next millennial.
So, Anthony Magistrelli talking about Crossing Brooklyn Ferry and the metaphors of productivity, that work is important to people, it connects us, it gives you a sense of being. Also, the flow of time and history is important. What are we going to mark our millennium by? So let's listen to Tony a little bit more.
The waters of the Hudson are connected to Whitman's inclusive poetics to other masses of water that are located at other points of the earth. The importance of, for example, the Ganges in India or the Nile, even the Mississippi. Water is capable of grand expansion, linking rivers and places and objects and people, the same spiritual design that reigns over everything Walt Whitman perceived. And it's another representation of temporal time linked to historical time. The water has always existed in the past, and it will always exist in the future. Whitman says in Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, I'm with you, you men and women of a generation, or ever so many generations hence. So as future men and women will look upon the water and stream across on the ferry, so Whitman employs a series of verbs that show his immediate contact and shared experience with them. He says, as the poem develops, "So I felt. I was one of the crowd. I was refreshed. I stood yet was hurried. I looked." I mean, these are all the sensations, all the feelings that Whitman shares with the people that he sees as he crosses the ferry himself. They're vital energies that Whitman brings to most of the poems that he wrote during his lifetime. Poems that, in spite of their varying subject matter, come back to core Whitmanesque principles: unity, destiny, timelessness, circularity, and an essential harmony among all objects and people and all historical eras.
Okay. We have a recorded segment of We Descend Upon You. Let's play that now.
We descend upon you and all things. We arrest you all. We realize the soul only by you. You faithful, solid, and fluid. You lead color, form, location, sublimity, ideality. Reveal every group, comparison, and all the suggestions and determination of ourselves.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Clark, and I'm a ninth grader at the New York Harbor School, and I'm excited to share our love of the harbor with Whitman. I'm Avery Benz. I'm in 10th grade at the New York Harbor School, and I'm very proud to be in a school that's helping to pursue my dream as well as Whitman, because we have the same dreams of restoring the harbor and bringing back the beauty that it once had.
I'm Matthew Davis. I'm a junior at the New York Harbor School. I just want to wish Walt Whitman a happy birthday, and I'm truly grateful that I get this opportunity to share this poem with everyone about how we're restoring the New York Harbor.
I'm Faith Beechen. I'm a sophomore at the New York Harbor School, and I'm excited to read this poem, which reflects Walt Whitman's dream of a beautiful harbor that I can say I'm helping restoring.
So those were New York Harbor School students. They are the youngest workers of New York Harbor. So what did Whitman know of science? He said, throb, baffled, and curious brain, throw out questions and answers. Suspend here and everywhere, eternal float of a solution. I too had been struck from the float forever held in solution. And solution really is something that Whitman thought about as he gazed upon the water back in the 1800s. And today, we have to look out into the harbor and ask the same question. What will be our solution? Solution is a homogeneous mixture composed of two or more substances. So you have a give and take. It's thesis, antithesis, and then it creates a synthesis. That's what has to be our goal. Whitman's solution was found in the water. He was aware of chemistry. A solution is an answer to a question. Whitman's prophetic vision saw eternal questions that presented eternal answers. We can define our lives in 2019 as living in a solution to a problem. And here we are, returning our waters of the New York Harbor and the New York Bight to their once previous healthy conditions. And allow me to introduce to you Sylvia D'Alessandro, founder of Sandy Ground, with her extended family. And as we move forward into the science portion of our program, look around, and everywhere we are living in a solution. Sylvia, come on up, say a few words.
First of all, I'd like to say good afternoon, and my name is Sylvia Moody D'Alessandro. My name is Sylvia Moody D'Alessandro, and I'm the executive director of the Sandy Ground Historical Society. Sandy Ground, located on the south shore of Staten Island, started out as a farming community, but by 1855, they were an oyster community. The economic base of the community was oystering. And oystermen came from the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, and they came up to the south shore of Staten Island, joined with the farmers, and they farmed oystering there from 1855 to 1916. In 1916, after factories had been on the waters, um, the oysters became toxic. Somebody died from eating a toxic oyster, and so then they said no more oystering. The community got smaller and smaller. We saw our community disappearing, and so we formed the Sandy Ground Historical Society. In 1999, a group came to us who was trying to restore the harbor with oysters. They said they were going to put 10,000 gallons of oysters back into the community, and they asked us if we would help. So another one of my grandsons and his friends agreed to help, and they went down every week and they measured the oysters to see if the water was clean enough by that point for them to grow. Good news, the oysters grew. Bad news, they were still toxic. And so that sort of kind of, and so what this group did is that they took us out by the Statue of Liberty. There's a picture of it right there. And we used this 100-year-old oyster basket to toss the ceremonial first oysters into the water. And so that was a major attempt to reseed the beds. And here we are today working with the Billion Oyster Project. And I'd like to introduce to you Agata, Agata Poniatowski from the Billion Oyster Project.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Agatha Panitosi. I'm from the Billion Oyster Project. I work as the Education Outreach Coordinator there. A little bit of history. In 1609, when Henry Hudson sailed into our harbor, there was about 350 square miles of oysters, which is 220,000 acres of oysters. They say in some historical documents that when it was in low tide, you could essentially walk across because there were so many oysters. So oysters, when you think about the hot dog stands throughout the city, they actually used to always be oyster stands. So oysters were very prevalent in our society, and they actually brought different sections of our society together. So there was oyster cafes or cellars on Canal Street, and Pearl Street is actually named because it was lined with oysters. And so it has this big historical meaning here in the city, and so we want to bring them back, not just because of that, but also one adult oyster, which is about 3 inches, can filter 50 gallons of water in a day. But oysters don't grow the way you see them in restaurants. They're not just the oysters on the half shell with one side and the other side. They actually grow in these clusters. So what happens is one oyster shell can be a home to 10 to 20 oysters. So if you have 10 oysters, which are each filtering 50 gallons of water a day, you get about 500 gallons from just one oyster shell. Throughout our program, we've actually diverted about 1 million pounds of oyster shell from landfill so that we could repopulate our harbor using that shell as a base. What happens is that oyster larvae will swim and seek something that's a hard substrate, and they typically prefer a calcium carbonate base, and they'll seek out that calcium carbonate base or the shell substrate, and so they'll attach to that and start growing their own shell and growing their own little clusters. So they grow in these reef-like structures. When they grow in these reef-like structures, there's a lot of nooks and crannies for a crab, a fish, and various other organisms to settle and to live. And so oysters not only filter our water, but provide a lot of space for biodiversity to accumulate, right? So we have a lot of spaces, and basically a domino effect, right? Because that fish, that crab has a predator and so on and so forth. And so you just get a lot of organisms. Lastly, our oysters, when they form these reefs, it's actually really cool because similar to a tree in a field, when there's a hurricane, if it's just one, it's more likely to fall down during that hurricane. However, if you have 5, those roots are intertwined, right? And so there's a hurricane and those trees will not fall down. So our oyster reefs kind of act in a similar fashion in stabilizing our shorelines as well as keeping everything there. And so when there is a wave that's coming and approaching, the wave energy isn't just from the top, it's also from the bottom. So if you have an oyster reef, then that wave energy is interrupted by the oyster reef. So something that would have been a really, really big wave ends up being a much smaller one. Not saying that it's total prevention of effects like we saw with the storm surge from Superstorm Sandy, but it's a nice mitigation method, a natural one. So today I actually brought some oysters with me. So throughout New York City, we have schools that adopt oyster research stations, and they actually collect the data for us. This data is mobile organisms, sessile organisms, water quality, as well as oyster growth and mortality rates. And so when the students go out to the cage, they will measure using different protocols with their teachers, and then publish that data for us to know where our oysters are surviving well and where they're not. It's also a nice way to notice like what kind of organisms are living where. On Staten Island, we actually see a lot of blue crabs, where on Governor's Island, we might see more oyster toadfish. There's a lot of variety in our ecosystem, and it really depends on where you are to see that all. It's really cool. So without further ado, if you guys want to get out. So there's a lot of organisms actually already growing on it. I know it kind of looks like a lot of muck, but all of these organisms, if anybody wants to poke one, these are sea squirts. Sea squirts are really funny because they are... Oh, poke one.
Poke one.
So sea squirts are really funny because they have these two funnels,
That's okay.
one that takes water in and one that takes water out, and so they are... So what you happens is that when you pull them out of the water, they suck up as much water as they can so they don't dry out. So when you pump them, they don't release, and that's why they're called sea So that's already some organisms that are growing on our cage here. They're called sea squirts. They're tunicate species. They're colonizing species. And so now inside we have our oysters. So this is what an oyster cluster will actually look like. So it's not just one single oyster. It's so on here, unfortunately, these guys didn't survive because they're open, but we do have one live one here on this structure. So if you guys look, even if an oyster is open, it doesn't fall apart. It doesn't, degrade. Thank you. And so this provides a space for crabs to hide, for fish to hide and live in that environment. So here's another structure. We have actually a lot more oysters on here. We have one. Although there's no place to wash. These oysters are actually a few years old. They were spawned in 2016. And the way that we spawn them is actually with the New York Harbor School. The New York Harbor School is a career technical education program school which focuses on marine industry. Oh yeah, there's a little crab.
Good job.
Alright. So he's a mud crab.
Likes you.
So the Harbor School, what they do is they have 6 different career technical education programs. Marine biology, vessel operations, ocean engineering, professional diving, marine systems technology, and marine policy and advocacy, as well as, did I say aquaculture? So aquaculture are the students that learn to farm, raise oysters, as well but they focus mainly on shellfish and our oysters. So what they do is they take oysters from our different sites that are doing really, really well, and they'll condition them for spawning. So that means that they'll feed them a lot so they have enough energy to create gametes. They will manipulate the water temperature so that the oysters think that it's summertime and time to spawn in our lab. And then they'll take them and they'll actually start to spawn them. When they spawn them, the oyster releases sperm and egg into the water column, and then they shoot off the oysters they meet, and they make a larva. That larva has 1 foot that it will swim around with, and it'll actually get pushed around by the current until it finds a substrate, so a shell substrate. So like I was mentioning earlier, we diverted about 1 million pounds of oyster shell, and so those oyster shells are what the larvae attach to. We take the oyster shells from the restaurants, we cure them for a year so we're not reintroducing any bacteria or invasive diseases or such, or even species, and then we will use them in our laboratory and then release that larva onto the shell, and within a few weeks we have oysters growing onto our shell. Now, oysters are very hungry creatures. As I said, 1 adult oyster can filter 50 gallons of water in a day, and so our larva, or our spat on shell, which is after the larva attaches to the oyster shell, that actually can't survive in our lab for too long because we don't have enough food to feed it. So we have it on our eco-dock. On our eco-dock, it's our nursery. In our nursery, they get housed prior to being put in these structures or a variety of other structures. Does anyone have any questions?
Billions.
Billions.
Yeah. Are there different types of oysters with different sections? Cold water or warm water oysters?
So all along the East Coast, it's usually one species of oyster. It's called the Eastern oyster, and that can go all the way up to like Maine, all the way down to the same oyster. Oh, great. Yeah. So the name of our project is the Billion Oyster Project for the reason that 1 billion oysters is estimated to filter the entire standing volume of New York City's harbor in 3 days. And our goal is by 2035. So right now we've restored about 28 billion.
A lot to go.
We do have a lot to go.
Where do you get the cocktail sauce?
So you cannot eat these oysters.
It's a good start.
You cannot eat these oysters, although we are working towards becoming part of the solution of cleaning our waterway. There are some issues structurally with New York City. How many of you know how our sewer system works?
Right there.
How does our sewer system work?
It's a combined sewer system. So the rain and storm runoff from the streets. Everything. If there's a really big rainstorm, it all overflows and goes straight into the canal. Rather than seeing it on the river, they just open the pipes and they.
And so our oysters are technically suspension feeders, which means that when they open up, they create a current, and they will push one way and pull the water the other way. So they create this system. And when they're doing that, they are taking in the toxins or whatever else that is in our water. It takes about 12 hours for an oyster to get toxins or chemicals into its system, into its heart, bloodstream. And so we cannot eat our oysters because if you ate one of our oysters, you might be eating sewage. Don't eat our oysters. It's very, very bad. But eventually, the hope is that, or maybe not to eat them, but at least it will be a healthier environment.
They serve an important part in the environment, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions?
Does this particular station fuller and does it come back?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't monitored this one in particular. This is from the Brooklyn Navy Yard, but we do see a lot of recruitment in certain areas. So like Coney Island Creek, I went to an event last weekend on Saturday, and we did a wild oyster survey, and we saw a lot of ghost shells, meaning that they were at some point alive. They were more on the outer banks of the intertidal area, but when you went in a little bit further in the water, you could actually see a lot of oysters with the tide.
How long is their natural life?
Do the fish eat oysters?
Do the fish eat oysters? Yes. There is 2 fish in particular that we see very often. One is called an oyster toadfish. It has jaw and teeth, and it can go up to 1 foot, and it will bite you. Sometimes it can actually crunch in them, and then you'll know that that's actually from the oyster drill. So oysters have a variety of species that like attack them, right? And that's a really big problem because our harbor was essentially lifeless for 50 years prior to the Clean Water Act. And so our oysters weren't surviving, they weren't around, they were not thriving. And so now that we're reintroducing our oysters, we have an issue because oyster drills and other species that have been commonly known to be eating oysters are thriving. So we have certain locations that are all of our oysters get decimated. So we had a monitoring in Patagat Basin in Canarsie a few days ago, and when we were taking out our oysters from our larger reef structure called the community reef, there was a crazy amount of oyster drill eggs all over our oysters. Not only were our oysters growing really well, but so were the oyster drills for obvious reasons.
Are oyster drills native or are they invasive?
They are native, but we do see some invasive species. There's a type of crab that's invasive, also a type of tunicate that the Cold Spring Harbor DNA lab discovered that there's a tunicate. So we do see a little bit of invasive species throughout the city, and you know it's unfortunate, but a lot of times it comes with both. That's a good question. So we are, it's not in all locations that they're being eaten like that. There is research being conducted by productivity professors who are doing a predatorial study on that. So I'm not sure if in all locations we're planting them at the same rate as they're being eaten. But in some locations they're doing really well, and so we want to continue providing oysters to that space. Last year, over the summer, last year throughout the whole year, we were commissioned to make these things called gabions, which are 2 foot by 2 foot cubes, and we filled them with blank oyster shells, no baby oysters on them at all, and we threw them into the water by the Tappan Bridge, or the new Andrew Cuomo. Help me out. Andrew Cuomo. The new one. Yeah.
That's the fight.
So when they were taking down that old one, there was a lot of oysters, a natural oyster population there, and so what they wanted to do is mitigate what was going on when they were constructing, so that we put these 422 gabions in the water nearby, so that that natural population, when they spawn, had a place to essentially migrate their nests.
So that's brackish water up at the Queasy Bridge.
So there's something called the salt wedge. The salt wedge can be up as far as Peekskill up in the Hudson. It really depends on the weather, the temperature, and how rainy it's been. And so it could also be as low as Manhattan. But oysters can survive in brackish water, which is a salty freshwater mix.
You don't want to put it on the box.
You want to grab a oyster?
Yeah, I will, but I'm just trying to maximize the view and the information I can extract.
As long as your arms are
No, I'm
long
okay.
enough to reach the box cover.
Yeah. When I have to, I'll put it on there.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah. I work.
So this one is a baby.
That's what I do. I work with video cameras. I work for the house. Huh? Yeah. Not yet.
I'll introduce you to them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
These are some of my favorite organisms. If you look really, really close, they have these like really cool patterns on them. They look a little bit like stars, but they also look like kind of what gross, and it like everything just sinks into the sludge. And so I'm not too sure about the predatory species, but we're working on, unfortunately, because they're in cages, but we don't really like to call them cages, we call them homes, because our oysters will grow actually similar to, have you ever seen a fence and a tree? A tree grows around a fence and it kind of takes it over. So our oysters do the same thing. So this is kind of like the blueprint of the reef that'll eventually be.
So they'll start growing around the outside of it.
Becomes.
Yeah. All right, I think I'm going to pass this off to Mark now and move on with our programming.
About it. That was terrific.
If anyone has any questions, I will be here afterwards as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now what we're going to do is switch homes.
Hello, everybody. Coming and I'm going to be showing off some glass technology, entertainment, educational, and windows and buildings. I'm a glass technology specialist. You can look me up on YouTube. My name is Glenn Greenberg, and what I'm showing off here is a glass technology that turns from dark to light with electricity. So when I plug it in, you can see how it changes in a 50% direction. When I disengage the electric, the glass goes back to a darkened state. So with electricity, it goes clear. And with this variable tint technology, you can use this in buildings or marine and vessels to block the sun for energy efficiency, for creature comfort, and you can save a lot of energy and stuff like that. Other than that, we have lots of other glass technologies, switchable privacy. We have a brand new clear solar panel that is a clear glass. It's revolutionary that a solar panel is made from clear glass. And we're going to be rolling it out in the AIA, the Architect Show in Las Vegas next month. So that's all I have to say. I just want to thank Mark and all the participants for holding this event. I think it's a great event, and we should all continue to try to educate our friends and neighbors, tell them what's going on with the environment to save everything for everybody. And don't forget, his sister Felicia has a wonderful website, tablearts.com. You can look up that one too.
All right, so let's wind down a little bit to listen to some music. I'm going to perform a song called I Can See the Light.
Power on.
Fix my E. In this world I'm living in, I can see the light. Sins are gone, now I know what is wrong and right. Morning came slowly pushing back the night. Good times now, I can see the light. On this road I'm walking on, I can see my way. Paradise I'm living for, each and every crossroads of the past, nothing more to say. Good times now, I can find my way. Mississippi Catfish, come here and tune your guitar. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that practice.
I want to give a big round of applause to Mark, who put this together. So take a bow. To them, not to me.
Jeez. You're my sense.
Uh-oh. Makes no sense around here. Jerry Joy, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York, in the house. We are in the house. Went to high school over there. And I've been a musician my whole life and played all over the place and still doing it. Here's a song about the Mississippi River, which is the longest river in the United States, and I think it has the most letters in the name Mississippi, right? Okay. And this is about being on the road as a musician and going out to the Mississippi River. You gonna dance with this one? Sure. You may wanna. Okay. Mississippi catfish, how'd you get in such a fix? Staring out at New York City through this pet shop window, it's a pity you can't be right now on the train heading home. If I'd arranged to pay the fare, would you do me a favor when you got there? Well, there's a woman living there, kind of cute, brown hair, with a smile so real, even make a cold fish heart feel. I had come to play, but I fell in love. Should have added up 1 and 1 is 2, but with a woman back home, what could my slide rule do? Except doodly doo, yeah, yeah. See, I don't know about you fish, probably do what you damn well wish. I never went to no fishy school, but I'll tell you up here, brother, we got other rules. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I said, oh boy. I said, well, baby, I got a problem on my mind. She said, well, baby, I got love and good love, and only love gonna make it feel fine. You know, she made it feel fine. She made it feel fine. So Mississippi catfish, I only got one wish now for you. If you see that girl of mine walking by your muddy waters, won't you tell her now I'm singing about her. Tell her I found what I was looking for, and I hope she does too. Who could ask for more? Ask for more, yeah, yeah. Well, I'll be back in the morning. And just listen to this warning. When you get away from home, things change. Cause brother, when you wander far from home, I said, brother, it gets harder, it gets harder.
Back whale. So there are some buoys 22 miles south of Far Rockaway that are designed to capture the sound of whales. There's an app on your phone that you can access called Whale Alert. Whale Alert will show you what that buoy is picking up on a hourly basis. The Melville buoy, which is what it's been nicknamed, is a collaboration between the New York Aquarium and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. The purpose of the creation of that buoy was to protect whales from the ship channels that are here in and out of New York Harbor. And it is basically one of the key points that this whole gathering is about, to make people aware of how important it is to eventually be more familiar with whale migration and the actual protection of whales as they pass through the New York Bight. Now, the interesting thing is Cape Cod must have 200 detections to date between April and May. We here in the New York Bight only had maybe about 25. So there are means to bring back whales to our area. It's an important thing where whales are attracted to a food source called the Atlantic menhaden. And there's controversy over that too, because the Atlantic menhaden is a very desirable fish to the dietary supplement industry. You have fish oil. The Atlantic menhaden is exactly that. So let's talk about our environment right here. So let me refer to my notes a little bit so I don't get ahead of myself. 1206. So do you guys know that there's whale watching right outside of the harbor? So you can actually get on a boat. Whale season has started. So let me introduce you to the American Princess and Gotham Whale.
Captain Tom Palladino, American Princess, along with Paul Seasworther, the founder of Gotham Whale. And starting first week in May, we'll start whale watching. And the whale watching we've been doing for about 10 years now, and it seems to get better and better and better. In the beginning, when we first started, we had 30 or 40% sightings. As the years went by, we got 50, we got 60. The last 2 years, we've had almost 90% sightings on whale trips. We've been in the boating business since 1945. There's nothing more rewarding as a captain to take 100 people out whale watching and see this magnificent creature jump out of the water. The people love it. I love it as a captain, and it's just a great, great experience.
Paul Seasworther, founder and CEO of Gotham Whale. We partner with the American Princess, and we get the opportunity to be on board to acquire the data for where each sighting occurs. And from those sightings, we're able to draw maps and indicate where the whales are likely to be, the time of year that they most likely will occur, and we're putting all that information together. So this is a great partnership with us being on the boat, Gotham Whale, and our volunteers collecting all this information. And we always tell the passengers that every time they come and they pay the fare for the American Princess, it's like a mini grant to Gotham Whale, because we get the platform to work off. And other than that, there wouldn't be any way to get out onto the water and see these whales. So we're doing the research, education, and advocacy for the whales that are coming back to New York City.
So there you have it. Whale watching outside of New York City, amazing. We will be Skyping with one of the naturalists on the American Princess in a few minutes. In the meantime, it's also important to acknowledge that there have been already humpback whale casualties on Long Island and Cape Cod this year. Shane Weeks is a member of the Shinnecock Nation Indian tribe on eastern Long Island. Shane is somebody that has put together memorial whale ceremonies based on the Shinnecock millennium of tradition where they honored all the beached whales. Last Tuesday, he performed this ceremony where he would take his turtle shell rattle and he sang a prayer to honor the spirit of the animal and gave thanks to the Great Spirit for its creation. Then he would spread dried sage in a clamshell and circle the whale 2 or 3 times. And this was the traditional ceremony. And he performed this before the scientists did their, it's called a necropsy, which is kind of an autopsy on whales. So they will discover what kind of reason there was for the death of the whale, but Shane thinks that most likely it was a ship strike, which is very common here in New York. So with that, you have the good and the bad. You have the whales, but you also have to be proactive. Ship captains know that they can refer to technology like Whale Alert, access Woods Hole Institute for the Melville buoy. They are aware of it. The U.S. Coast Guard is aware of it. The Coast Guard monitors these devices. Is Mitch ready?
Yes, Mitch is ready.
All right. So,
how do you want to do this now?
well, we can have everybody look at the phone while Mitch is on Skype.
Okay, 1 second. Mitch is coming online. Here he comes. Okay, Mark, I'll tell you what. Why don't you take this and... All right, Mitch, I'm going to turn you over to Mark here. We're live on the pier in Brooklyn, New York.
Hello, Mitch. All right, everybody can see Mitchell, right? How are you? Oh. All right, let me at least get him up to the microphone. All right, so, where is the mic better?
Mitch, tell everybody where you are right now.
So hold on just a moment. I got to make a quick run into the pilot house.
Okay. So this is the American Princess out doing whale watching as we speak. Can you guys hear this?
Excuse me? All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the American Princess. We're currently in Greasy Point Rockaway. This is Reese Landing, part of the National Park Service. This is what the landing looks like. That's Brooklyn over there, Manhattan back there, and there's the Marine Parkway Bridge. So we're right here in Queens, New York.
All right, so why don't you introduce yourself and who's piloting the boat?
So my name is Mitchell Steinhardt. I'm one of the volunteers with Gotham Whale, the research, education, and advocacy arm of the American Princess. Today,
That was good.
Yeah, that's our cue that we're getting ready to go. Today, driving the boat, conning the boat, helming the boat, is Captain Frank DeSantis. That's Captain Frank.
Hi, Frank.
Hey, Captain Frank.
Hi, Frank.
There he is again. He's getting ready to pull the boat out, so he doesn't. He's got to run. So yeah, he's getting ready to pull the boat out. We're gonna head out into the Jamaica Bay Inlet and then out towards the Atlantic Ocean. And we're gonna look for some humpback whales, which are the whales we predominantly see in this area.
All right, and you were out last week as well. What did you see there?
We had dolphins last week. Now, we're pretty sure we saw a couple of whales, but we didn't get any photo evidence of them. But we did have about 45 to 50 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins. And third of since the waters have been clearing up over the past 40 years, this forage fish, really important fish, bottom of the food chain, supports everything above it, has been coming back in abundance. So it's drawing the whales, it's drawing dolphins, it's drawing all kinds of sea life in that hadn't been present for decades beforehand due to pollution.
So the cleaner waters are bringing back the feeder.
Seal season. It's bringing back so many different forms of wildlife that were predominant in New York before the Industrial Revolution just totally destroyed the ecosystem. And it's ever since the Clean Water and Clean Air Acts in the 70s, it's been getting clearer and clearer, and it's bringing back more and more wildlife every year.
Well, that's very good news. Very good news for New York and for the environment and for the fish and for the whales.
So Mitchell is a specialist in photography. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your work?
So I'm a photographer on my off days, which are pretty much my weekends. I do predominantly landscape and wildlife. Ever since discovering the American Princess, it's going to be 3 years ago next month, I have spent every weekend out on this boat and have accumulated thousands of images of whales and dolphins. So that's what I do. On my own days, I work as a real estate admin. No, not a real estate agent, but this is what I do on the weekends. This is what I'd love to do. I look forward to getting out here every weekend.
All right. So we want everybody here to know about the importance of Gotham Whale. So tell us about the petition that's online.
So Gotham Whale is, as I said, is a research advocacy and education organization. We're here to educate the population of New York City, the New York metropolitan area, northern New Jersey, parts of Long Island, about the fact that humpbacks and other marine life have returned to New York City. Gotham Whale currently has a petition out to some boats from Virginia from coming up and taking the Manhattan out of our waters, both New Jersey, New York, and some of the federal waters. We want to try and keep them out of the federal waters. The company is called Omega Protein, based out of Virginia. They first started coming up last year because of our Manhattan abundance. Again, they come up from Virginia, so the Chesapeake Bay area is kind of a dead because they just over-harvested the Manhattan from the area. So Gotham Whale got a petition out to try and keep the Omega Protein boats from coming up into the New York area and poaching our fish. Because we want to keep our whales, our dolphins, we want to keep everyone around for many years to come.
All right. Well, you have our support here, and our goal is to make more people aware of the ocean mammal situation regarding poaching. So thanks, Mitch, and get back to your job there as a naturalist. And give us a holler if you do see anything, all right?
Will do. And if you're interested in coming aboard a whale watch, please visit AmericanPrincessCruises.com.
AmericanPrincessCruises.com.
What was that, Mark?
Nothing.
AmericanPrincessCruises.com.
Yep, we'll be going out through November. And for all of you mothers out there, have a lovely Mother's Day, and we hope to see you out here soon.
I've been called a mother before.
Thanks, Mitchell.
All right, have a great day, everyone. If we see any whales, we'll let you know about it.
All right.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Say bye to Mitch, everybody.
All right. So another important thing, as we mentioned, was...
Wait, you forgot your nose.
Thank you. Right off the coast of Far Rockaway is called the Rockaway Artificial Reef. 413 acres. It contains a lot of the debris from the Tappan Zee Bridge project, but it's been in existence since 1960, and they have slowly been feeding more and more artificial product into the reef, and it's a natural environment now for certain species of fish and shellfish life. So let me play you the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We had a brief conversation with him earlier this week. They are in charge of the reef, so I'll play a little for you.
Just wanted to the New York Hub.
Not that.
My name is Jesse Hornstein, and I am a marine biologist with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, currently located in our Marine Resources Office. One of the programs DEC has for artificial reefs is what we call our Artificial Reef Volunteer Angling and Diving Survey. So we ask citizen scientists or the everyday person who goes and fishes or dives on these reefs to provide us with information. So things that we ask them to collect the information on, be catching when they go fishing or viewing when they're diving underwater, which reefs they were fishing or diving at, the types of materials they may have been fishing or diving on. And by providing this information to us, allows us to better understand how effective the reefs are and how well they're working. And with that information, we're then able to create better reefs, essentially. So if we know something, is producing lots of fish and really working well, we use that information when we're building reefs in the future. So by providing this information, public gets better reefs and better downloaded. And there's information on the DEC webpage if people are interested in that. DEC also has various other citizen science programs that people can check out. They check out the DEC website as well. As reefs mature over time, so first thing that typically happens is encrusting organisms, things like mussels will attach to the structures that are put down, other sponges, other things that will cover the materials, and fish such as tautog, which is known as blackfish, black sea bass, scup. Other species will also come in there and start feeding on the life that's on the structures. And over time they mature, and these reefs essentially are functioning as similar to coral reefs, but in a different way. So they're vibrant ecosystems underwater. Right now, we actually do have a northern species of coral that does inhabit waters up here. There's a few different types, but one in particular called the northern star coral can be viewed, I believe, on Rockaway Reef, and some of our others need to thrive. So if it happens, it would be probably many thousands of years down the road to be determined. But yep, the Hudson is, and it's one of the largest underwater canyons in the world. It extends out over the continental shelf and reaches depths up to thousands of feet deep. And really, one way to think about it is like the Grand Canyon, but it's underwater. And scientists have found lots of interesting marine life living at the bottom of this canyon, such as deep water, cold water, northern corals, and various other species of fish and crustaceans as well.
So that is the Hudson Canyon, just 100 miles southeast of here. It's an incredible deep canyon, as he said, similar to the Grand Canyon, underwater, where coral, deep water cold coral lives. And this is an area that a lot of future divers will be going down to if you are into diving. So, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is involved in all of the coastal and underwater continental shelf locations, along with other agencies like NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. So what we also need to do is turn our attention to what the Coast Guard does, because they play a very important part of New York Harbor as the ships come into the harbor. If you heard the news this morning, there was a barge accident in the Houston port, spill of gasoline or some, chemical, oil, whatever. And as things have gotten better, it's less of a situation, but it does happen. And the Coast Guard is responsible to make these efforts happen quickly. So let's listen to a little bit of our conversation with the U.S. Coast Guard.
God, it's so cold out.
Environmental protection, marine safety. So those are the majority of calls that we get here. We are 24/7 command center. There's always someone on duty here. We're different teams that work in the office. They respond to oil spills, to marine safety events, to the vessels that are in danger or running aground. So, and we also have cutters, aids, and navigation teams here, buoy tenders, and we also oversee different cutters through small boat stations in the Port of New York and New Jersey. We have stations Sandy Hook in New Jersey, station New York here, Staten Island, and also station East Point in the beginning of Long Island Sound. So the majority of our work involves working with NOAA and state and local partner agencies. So when we receive a call about whale or any other living marine resources, we usually refer to NOAA and to our state agencies. But to assist them, we use the safety request broadcast, so the rest of the population and all the mariners in the harbor are aware of the mammals that's transiting or they're in our waters. And then also the message gets sent to the commercial and to the recreational. So the only agencies there is qualified and is able to do the entanglement of the marine mammals is NOAA. So we usually work with them closely and we provide the safety zone. I know there's entangled whale life, and that's when we did the safety zone and did the broadcast for the public so they don't come close to that. So all the ships that enter the Port of New York being vetted by the vetting duty officer. We also have the vessel traffic service that is 24/7 manned, and they're constantly talking to commercial vessels, the commercial vessels that come in into Port of New York, and they assess the threats, and then we also have them ashore.
All right, so we'll now also have a conversation from somebody that works in marine construction. And Gotti will give us a few words about his personal experience. His company is called by the Coast Guard regularly to do cleanup here in the harbor. So here is Gotti.
Today there's practically two companies, one in Staten Island and one is us in the Port of New York. So we have men around the clock, 24/7, ready to respond. The boats are set up with containments and protection gear and absorbents, installing mooring. We do salvage work, we lift sunken boats. We did a lot of work after Hurricane Cindy for the Coast Guard. We did the Jamaica Bay cleanup. We did some lifting boats in Staten Island in Great Fields. We did some lifting boats in Atlantic Highlands. Also, to do more construction, you need a little more engineering background, mechanical background, to bring the equipment to be able to be efficient in repairs. We do everything in the house, from electricians, mechanics, painting, welding, aluminum fabrication for aluminum boats. We have 3 tugboats, which is towing vessel. This is one of the smaller tugboats we're on. We're moving barges, material barges. We do a lot of crane barge work. So the tugs are pretty busy. The 3 tugs that we have right now, we have 1 tug, the tug Durham. You might hear him on the radio. He doesn't have a plan, or it's a small personnel, and the Coast Guard will dictate to him or give him a list of protocol. And if they find that he's not doing the right thing and not taking the act, they would federalize it, they would hire us. First you obtain it, but then you have something, you can attach absorbent, you can put a skimmer in it, a lot of history in the New York Harbor.
All right. So, Lauren?
Is she gonna read? I don't think she knows about it. Yes, she does. She's gonna be sponsored by CMA. Oh, is that what I see what
Let's move on with our program and introduce Noland.
Picture again, Mark.
So this is
Hello. So lovely to be here with you all today. I'm a poet, and something that the poets like to focus on is lineage, which is happening all the time. And I don't want to be a downer, but it's wonderful all the positive work that people are doing. However, this morning I read a headline that said, in the past 45 years, 60% of the Earth's wildlife has vanished. So as we continue to do positive work, we have to also be reminded of the larger picture and predictions from our scientists, who are warning us that if we do not change a lot about our lifestyle in a very short amount of time, we're going to, it's kind of unimaginable. Perhaps the wildlife will flourish, but a lot of us will not be here. So I wanted to evoke this this idea about time, and about time being future, past, and present all happening at once. So we can't just act for today or what's happening today. We have to act as though tomorrow is already here, because it is. In the minds of the poet, all times are contemporaneous. Floods are rising. Amiri Baraka said they fuck up the water, they kill fish, they kill birds, they annihilate people for money, they have no gods, they have no perceived good, nothing they would live or die for but money. Sin is poverty, outsiders, not from Europe. Jesus said it was impossible for a rich man to be good. No camels pass through no needle's eyes. Why God and the prophets of the ancient world condemned the worship of Baal, the golden calf, animalism glorified. In the mind of the poet, all times are contemporaneous, and all the scheming, wheeling, dealing, eternal rowing and roaming, who plays with time as uncostumed medium. Rimbaud said priests, professors, doctors, lawyers, you are wrong in delivering me into the hands of your law. Isn't it the law to uphold this balance, all the sacred souls hanging in the throes, Bardo, between life and disappearance, multitudes of spirits you contain? The great contradictions of spirit, one that history smooths out with an unrelenting glare, on, and it is us, the living, who shall cross from shore to shore, but it is you who wrote to poets yet unborn, some of whom, not picking up your legacy and name, tarnished and tarred and marred and scarred and barred priests, professors, doctors, are you delivering us into the hands of law of creation, where beautiful, unthinkable magma manifestations shape shift underwater, mysterious excavation into mothers of creatures yet unborn, the card drawn, the key turned? In 45 years, 60% of the Earth's wildlife has disappeared. Which ferries do you see us crossing in 45 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 5 minutes? Though they preach apocalypse, we know in the dirt the blotting out of death cannot be stopped. Like a floodgate, broken like wild mare running, this force called life doesn't cease. Floods are rising in the mind of the poet. All times are contemporaneous. Thank you.
Protected. So our initiative is to make Brooklyn much more involved in helping the world. So again, our purpose is to recognize the hardworking men and women of the harbor too. Um, we're all here to celebrate Whitman's vision. Whitman knew we would be here. He knew that we would take care of the harbor, and he applauds our efforts. So we cannot disappoint him. So with that, we're going to close. Jerry Joya, come on up.
This is an island song. This is a sing-along island song. And I said you're going to sing. Don't get embarrassed. We're pointing at you. This is kind of a reggae, and I know I'm occasionally challenged, but I will do my best. And dedicated to the guy who kind of Bob Marley and the Wailers. Speaking of whales, but almost. And I used to repair his guitars for him. It's hard to keep it in tune because the wind and it's changing. It's a good excuse.
I have many other pursuits.
It's an island song. Was playing one day by Montego Bay when the Asian man come to we. He say he locked away, does he hear us play? Would we like to go with him to the USA? We say we don't know, man, just what to say. Things are far too big in the USA. He said, I'll take you to this place, have no fear. There's an island way up north that's much like here. He said, go Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. Look it up. Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. Now that's the chorus you can sing on later, right? Oh, Brooklyn is an island too. Everybody got that? You'll be quizzed later. So we get on this plane that flies so high. We hope and we pray that we don't die. The plane land okay, yet we still have fear. Cause we don't know nobody living here. Everybody. Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. I can only. Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. I like the way that sounds. Now the agent man take us to the club that night. So many strange faces that we feel fright. So we play real loud. We play. People all jump up and they sing out loud. What are they singing? Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. Feels like Brooklyn. Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. Now the agent man say they like us so good. Got to make a video. That's a thing we should. Gonna make a song about an island band. By now you know the words, so come on people, lend a hand. Everybody. Oh, Brooklyn, I hear you. Brooklyn is an island too. Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. Well, there's nothing in Manhattan over there. And you can wear your hat in Brooklyn. Yeah, starting in Manhattan, but you can wear your hat in Brooklyn. It's an island too. Let's go round. Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. Oh, Brooklyn. Brooklyn is an island too. I said Brooklyn is an island too. 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 Give yourselves a hand. Brooklyn in the house. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Thank you all for coming. Yay. And we'll see you next year with another program. Woo! Thank you.
Hey, that was good.
Good job, Mark. Okay. By the way, that is Nissan TV. She's a sailor that owns a tour company.
Who is? Where? What?
That's Nissan. She's on the sailboat.
Where they
On
can
the
sail?
side?
Yeah, the sail there. She's sailed away.
Yeah. The wind
Okay.
didn't bring her this way?
All right.
Sorry it took us so long.
Why?
We took the ferries and we didn't know there's like 40 minutes between ferries.
You took the ferry.
You know
You
the
could have
schedule?
brought some pastries from Manhattan.
All right. So our live stream is done.
That's it.
Okie doke.